All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Conversations on Retail. I'm Matt Pfeiffer, founder and CEO of Supplier Community. I'm here today with my friend Andy Murray. Andy, thank you so much for making the time to visit with us today. You and I had a great opportunity to visit. It's been weeks ago, but I've still got the notes that I took. And I think a lot of people, and I've seen interviews even recently where people have kind of wanted you to kind of go through and chronicle your career and so forth. And it is a fascinating story. But the thing that sticks out to me the most about our conversation prior was the George Bernard Shaw quote that you left me with about people going to the grave with music inside them. And you're definitely a person that just continues to do more and more. And what I'd like to do is kind of start where I normally start. And just hear more about your childhood, your upbringing, where you come from. I know you come up from an entrepreneurial family, but just kind of what were some of the things that happened early in your life that helped you discover, who you were and your interests and your passions and your abilities that helped to kind of shape you into the person you are today?
Well, first of all, thanks, Matt, for having me on. I've followed your career and what you've been doing for it feels like 100 years now, and so it's amazing how you've built the brand. It's a great question. First time I've been asked that question, actually. So I'll give that a shot. I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. My dad started a company from scratch, and my mom worked in it as a CFO, and I watched it grow. It was in construction and plumbing and stuff like that in Cincinnati, and when you're a kid and you're seeing that happen, and it's probably 4 or 5 before I started to realize, what he was doing and trying to understand it. It's just you think that's the way business is done. And so I would sneak down into the hallway near the front door early on a Saturday or a summer morning to just see if I could go to work with him and ride with him. And some days he could, and he'd take me and we would go. It'd just be shadowing him around, sitting in the car, playing with his car phone, which then was the size of a phone book. I'm talking here now,
Right.
70s. And the way he treated the workers, the way he worked with his people, the culture, it was just fun. And he made it exciting. And he really took on a lot of challenges. And I don't think there was an obstacle he couldn't overcome as an entrepreneur. And I just learned that and got that in my blood very deep at an early age. And I knew at some point, that's what I wanted to do, is eventually start a company. Fortunately, I suppose I started my professional career at EDS in computer science, which is miles away from being an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and then another 10 years at Procter and Gamble. So it was I went from a right brain aspirational entrepreneurial idea to straight into left brain for the first, part of my
Yeah.
career.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to jump too far ahead because I want to hear about your mom as well, because I know she was an accountant, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly, right? So you
Yeah.
spent a lot of time around business people growing up, your parents, and then
Yeah.
obviously the people that were in their circle. But the question I also have is, so I knew when I was 10 years old that I didn't want my father's life. I didn't want
Mm.
to go to work for somebody for the rest of my life, and I knew that the entrepreneurial journey, at least as I had been reading an Entrepreneur magazine and other places,
Yeah.
looked really, really exciting and interesting to me. And I ended up having a career at Walmart. But if I'm honest, I will tell you that those 12 years that I was at Walmart, while the work was quite fulfilling, it was really a frustrating period of time for me because I felt
Hmm.
like, to quote Steve Jobs, I felt like I was living someone else's life. And I
Yeah.
just couldn't come up with that idea or that opportunity that I really felt was strong enough to get me out. So when you were at EDS and at P&G doing great work and learning, tons, obviously, that would contribute to a great, remarkable, successful career. Was it a frustrating period of time for you, or were you able to endure it patiently?
Matt, my experience are so similar. I endured it and patiently. I saw a lot of the challenges with it. I was probably a bit more ambitious than the system would allow for that to work. And so I did a lot of entrepreneurial things at P&G that satiated me for a while,
Mm,
volunteering to go to Jackson, Tennessee, which wasn't really in my professional career path to start up a data center. And all my peers said, why are you going there? You need to stay in Cincinnati and go up and down the elevator where the execs go. And I didn't. I just went to the fringe. And then coming to Fayetteville, Arkansas, oh my gosh, that was like, where is that? And all of my peers were like, you're making a huge career mistake coming down here. And I heard about Tom Muccio, what a great leader he was. And I
right.
thought I'd just come down for 18 months and work for him and learn a lot. And again, going to the fringe. When I got here, I was amazed at first of all how many exciting things were happening. everything they told me about career development was wrong, because that Walmart was such a big part of P&G's business. The execs were coming here. And so I had a chance to do that, to be in front of them. But eventually caught up with me was the bug I can't do this, and I could almost imagine in Lion King where Mufasa looked at Simba and said, you are, get the quote right, you are more than what you have become. And so I think, I was hearing that in the back of my head of, I was born to do something more entrepreneurial that was in my blood, and I had to leave, and it was a perfectly good job. And others are like, why are you leaving a perfectly good job? And yet it was that thing, you can't describe it, but you've got to do it. And if you don't do it after, I'm really thankful I spent 10, 11 years in the corporate space before going entrepreneurial, because I learned a lot. I probably don't appreciate that until later.
Sure.
But it was really a good experience for me overall. But I knew I had to leave and do something different as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you say about not your words, but how maybe that entrepreneurial calling has an expiration date, that if you don't respond at some point, maybe you never will. And that was my greatest fear as well. I was an expat in Japan. I had never before had an assignment at Walmart that had a defined end date.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is going to be the easiest opportunity, if I'm ever going to have it, to transition out, because there's a job that is coming to an end. And then it was just a matter of being courageous enough to do it. The other thing I would say, and I'd love to hear your comments on this, is, even though I grew up with all these entrepreneurial inclinations, Northwest Arkansas was and is an incredibly special community. And I think if I would have ended up anywhere else, I may have not ever realized, that vision, that dream. And that there was just, so, like you said, so many exciting things that were happening in Northwest Arkansas. It was almost like this contagion. And I wouldn't say people were making it easy, look easy rather, but it was quite inviting to see all these new companies just popping up to serve Walmart and their supplier teams.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the energy was crazy. And I think, I came here in the 91, beginning of 91. And then that's back when, Procter was bigger than Walmart, if you can believe that. But now I think they have their own zip code. So it's grown from a size. But the energy was very, very exciting. And if you think about it, look, you got, Tyson's and all of these, JB Hunt, you've got Sam Walton, you've got an entrepreneurial city environment that the owners and entrepreneurs were really freshly, still in the vibe of the city in the Northwest Arkansas area. So if you couldn't do it here, this was the place to do it. And I agree with you. Also agree with you that if you don't do it at a certain window of time, those golden handcuffs come on you, and you'll just never do it, because you're going to get locked in. And I did it around, that 30, 31 age. I don't know how old you were when you made that break,
32.
but it's like, I saw the future, and it was either you're going to do this now, or you're going to, enjoy the corporate ride the rest of the way out. And I just, but you're right, that window you got to really pay attention to.
Right. Well, as you get older, obviously you have more responsibility, and you're not just risking your own well-being. You've got a couple of kids, and people that are depending on you. One of the other things I think is quite interesting about your story, and I would never say, oh my gosh, we're so much alike, but I know that when you started your first business, you were very intentional about writing down who you are, what you stand for. Where I think a lot of people go immediately to the transactional. How can we create cash, and you skip over that, because, and I want to talk about you as culture champion, but really taking the time to define who are we, who are we not, and letting that kind of serve as your guiding path, I guess, forward.
You're right. I mean, 100%. And I was thinking about that the other day. When you're in a space of uncertainty, like when you're starting out brand new, and everybody's heard of VUCA, uncertain and complex and such. But the more uncertainty you have in front of you, the more I think you have to lean on principles versus policies. And when you're scaling efficiency and such like that, it gets very policy driven. But the good news, I think, on being an entrepreneur or going out and doing new things, innovation, whatever you want to do, call it, you have to rely on something that's not policy based. And so you have to have principles or you have no way to do it. And you're right. I mean, for me, the first thing I did on day one of the company was I got out a 3x5 index card, which served me well later when I faced the decision to sell the company or not, of what my dream was, which was to build a great company and then define what does a great company look like? Great culture. And so that means you have to be intentional about how do you build a culture, great clients, which means you just don't take anybody. I mean, you want to really understand what makes a great client. And I learned over time, sometimes you have to teach a client to be a great client. They don't always come in the door as a great client. Great financials, if it doesn't make money and work, it's not going to scale. Great in the community. And then you have to have a great talent. And I think to me, those were the guiding principles to start with that really helped me make decisions all the way through. And it was such an important principle to pay attention to that when it came time to face a decision to sell the company or not, it came down to my wife pulled that card back out and said, let's go back and look at what we started. And it's like, your dream was to build a great company, not to own one. And those are two different things. And we had the opportunity, thankfully, to scale it so it could go global. And that was a builder mentality than an owner. And she was right. It's like, that's really what this was about from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think so for so many, maybe this isn't the case, but it seems like for so many, the entrepreneurial option is more about an escape, right? Where it's like, I can't imagine working for somebody for the rest of my life. So how can I go out and hustle my skill set and replace that income? And it's less about how do I build something great. And the interesting thing about my own career, in my 30s, I would say 20s and 30s, it was really all about just making money. And then in my 40s, it's been about money's still important, obviously, but you become more choosy, I think, about the kind of work you do and the people you do it with. And it becomes really more in some ways about legacy and doing work that matters and things that, you're having no regrets at the end.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And Matt, when I went back into the corporate world at 6-7 years at Walmart recently, and then just retired again, or came back out of that, I came back out of it in March, and it took me probably 6 months to relearn what it means to be an entrepreneur again. And because it's such a different world, and a lot of people have a romantic, they want to be an entrepreneur, but I'd say they have a romantic idea about it more so than, there's a very, very different piece to it. And it's completely different way of thinking. And it took me a while to recalibrate that, because you are driven as an entrepreneur from what you believe in at a very deep level. You shape your day. You drive your time, and you have to make the choices, and you're responsible for those choices. And that and the clarity that sometimes can be provided by a corporate framework is gone. And so it's up to you to decide. And that's a lot of pressure. It's not an easy run. It is, as some people may have a romantic idea of being an entrepreneur, is all about having this freedom and, passive income, 4-hour work week. And I've not seen that happen yet. I don't know if that's been your experience, but it is a very different world than a corporate world. And the corporate world's got its own challenges and its own learnings and its own skills, but they're not just an easy switch.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I've read so much over the years about, imposter syndrome. And I read an article in Inc. magazine a long time ago. Basically, it was comparing, entrepreneurship to riding atop a lion. And people look at you and like, oh my gosh, he is so brave. Look at him up on top of that lion, and he's absolutely fearless. And the guy on the lion is like, I'm on a lion. How did I get up here? And how in the world do I keep this thing from killing me? So, the perception. One of the things Bob Conley, who well, shared with me years ago, was, and you may not agree with this, but he said Walmart has made people soft. Because and the reason so many executives have gone to other companies and failed is because at Walmart we never went through a tough time. I mean, we were always just like really, really successful. We didn't know what it was like to fight to survive. And I think that's why a lot of people, like I said, have left to go to other companies, or left and started other companies and find themselves all alone, have really had a difficult time getting through. What are your thoughts on that?
I think he's partially right. I think
Okay.
when you come into Walmart in a more senior executive level, it's like swimming with the sharks because you
Yeah.
really have to perform and produce pretty quickly.
Mhm.
And I joined as an SVP, so it was and you're in it, and it's a completely different culture than what
Yeah.
a Procter or other cultures are, right? I mean, it's so real. It's the velocity and the time is so fast. But I mean, Bob didn't obviously work where I worked in Asta, which was I got there in April of 2016, and we were running a -1 or -2 comp, but had been for some time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the bottom fell out pretty quickly. And by July, we were running a -7 comp. And you know more than anyone, you hit a -7 comp in a retailer. I mean, you've got to make some emergency changes and
Right.
really figure this thing out. And that was probably the best thing that happened to us at some level, because at a -1 or -2, you don't really want to throw out the things that don't work yet because you're still a little and you kind of travel and hope that it's just a little tweak will make it. But when it got to -7, I could stop a lot of stuff. I stopped the tab, which there was not a lot of resistance there because that sense of urgency. But I think that was the entrepreneurial side of me kind of coming into full flow in a corporate environment, because that's what you do as an entrepreneur every day. You learn to eat problems for breakfast,
Yeah.
and so facing problems was a healthy thing to get the kind of change needed. And then new CEO and such, and it pulled back up into positive comp again. But that was a treacherous time. I would say it was anything but soft. And the good thing about it is it did feel very entrepreneurial during that
Yeah.
negative time.
Sure. Was it difficult for you to go back after enjoying the freedom for so long of kind of running your own businesses? Was it a tough decision?
Uh, it wasn't a tough decision because I felt like this was the part of the total customer journey I hadn't really seen. I've been,
Mm.
you had the good fortune of being in it, but from an agency side, I saw it from a supplier side, but I never really saw it from the inside out. And so
Yeah.
my thing was this would be a 2-year journey. Stephen Quinn, when he hired me, and Bill Simon at the time said, okay, this guy's only going to stay a couple of years because he's an
Yeah.
entrepreneur at heart. And so no one really thought I'd stay there nearly 7 years. I mean, that was like, really, but because they thought that entrepreneurial side would just be too much of a pullback. But we were doing so many new things, and then the opportunity to go to Asda in the UK for international was so compelling, because you've got, even though the numbers have like half as many digits, you do have a broader scope in the role, which let me touch more areas of the total customer journey than I would have ever been able to do in the US. And so I found that very, very compelling. But eventually over time, I mean, there was opportunities to stay longer, but for me, it was really, I had to get back to that entrepreneurial space. And I'll tell you why, Matt. I mean, it's really about being able to control your time. And if well, again, more than anybody probably, that when you're in the retail space, my agenda for a week was pretty scheduled out months in advance on repetitive meetings and timeframes. So I probably only had 10 or 15% of my time truly discretionary that I could, come up and do new things. Otherwise, you're in operations meetings, you're in you're doing these routines that are required to make such a big operation run.
Yeah. One of the things I remember from our conversation was your comments about life being a mosaic and the importance of
Mm.
living in the moment. What has that meant to you over the years, and how has that shaped your thinking about company culture?
Well, it shaped it quite a bit. And at the core of it is, and I saw this when I was, it kind of came clear to me when I was running Saatchi X, or at that time, Thompson Murray. And I saw a lot of 25 to 27-year-olds want to grab some time, a cup of coffee, and talk about, I don't know if this is what I should do with the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Is shopper marketing part of my purpose? And those kind of questions were being put on the table. And what I saw it was doing to them was robbing them of the opportunity to be in the moment. Because if you always think you're maybe not in the right spot, you don't really fully commit. And you
Right.
have to go and cross that Rubicon of being able to fully commit into the role, into life, because that's when all the big opportunities came. So I'm a huge believer, and it's totally shaped my life around not getting perplexed over long-term purpose. Put core values at the center of your life, but then be super clear that the moment you're in is where you absolutely should be at the moment, and go full on 100%. And then pay attention to the things that are coming around you, because every single thing that's happened to me from a career opportunity has not come through engineering a path or, seeking a purpose. It's all come from trying to be the best I could be in the moment I was in. And then an opportunity comes and the world starts to come to you, and you start to see those opportunities because you're paying attention to the moment. And that has guided every single decision. It was in the moment when I got a call from, it used to be Claudia Mobley down at the Walton
Yep.
College for the CRE conference, and said, our keynote speaker can't make it. And it's like 2 days before the conference. Can you come keynote? Well, I'd been out of the space for about a year and a half on the company I was working on, starting up. And I'm like, I don't know, Claudia, I don't know if I have anything to say, but yes, I'll do it. And put myself in a position where it was a bit over my head at the time. But I think for me, it's always been about putting yourself a little bit in over your head, because that causes you to really commit to the moment. And then out of that, I just did 10 note cards on what every sales and Walmart buyer should know about technology and how it's changing. And Stephen Quinn was in the front row, saw it. And within a couple of days, he called me and said, hey, how would you like to come work at Walmart? That wouldn't have happened if, I'd ignored that or wasn't paying attention to what was really happening in the moment. And that's been my whole life, of in those moments trying to pay attention.
Serendipity, right? I think
Yeah.
you've mentioned that once before as well. So if there was a season of your life that you could go back and live again, and I don't think any of us would actually do it if we could, but
Mm.
if there was a season in your life that you could go back, either because it was so rewarding, or because that there was something you would like to have a shot at doing better the second time, what season would that be? Would it be in your personal life? Would it be in your professional life? Would it be during your entrepreneurial journey? What season of your life would you repeat?
I wouldn't repeat the first year of the startup.
Mm.
That was not fun. That was terrifying, because you don't know, if you don't land that job that's next in front of you, or consult. It was more of a consulting thing. Then you're not going to eat, and so that is not a fun place to be. But
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that experience. But I would say when the agency got up to be at about 200, and we were going international and opening offices, and we had enough talent and development and people, and we were still controlled our own destiny somewhat. That was an amazing time, and I feel like I did my best work back then. Not that I'm not trying to do good work now, but going back to my journals, I felt like I was at a peak, because when you are the CEO, you are trying to come up with principles to provide guidance and leadership. And there's nothing like being a CEO of a privately held company, if you really enjoy that, and being able to provide direction and clarity and engagement and winning new business, and seeing talent develop and explode in their opportunities and grow. And so that was just a tremendous time. And even today, I look back and I still connect up with all the people, that a lot of the people that I worked with, because it was such a bond that was created. And I think for most people, there was probably some big quest that they were on, that they worked through together, that bonding moment is so much of the going to be their memories when they're in the rocking chair post retirement. They're going to remember those initiatives where they started that company together, or they took on that major project, or they landed that integration, whatever it is. It's that impossible moment that you work through as a team, is where I think you clock your career and you look back, and those are the things that you're going to remember most.
Yeah. Thinking back to the years at Thompson Murray and of course
Mm-hmm.
Saatchi, in what ways has the world, in terms of retail and consumer and consumption, in what ways do you think the world has changed the most significantly? And in what ways are we still just the same as it's always been? Tom Coughlin used to talk about, retail really is a simple business. We have a tendency of really complicating it, but at its core, it's a simple business. So again, in what ways has the world changed the most dramatically since those days of Thompson Murray and Saatchi? And in what ways is it the same as it was then?
Yeah, well, I think it's more the same than different. In 1991, I was on a P&G Walmart top to top meeting, had an opportunity to go present. I was on the agenda to present. I was talking about an innovation project we were doing around data and such. And on the agenda was issues around out of stock with cosmetics and pricing on diapers and, those kind of things. Fast forward to, a few years ago, I'm in top to top meetings at Asda in the UK, and those same agenda items are on the agenda. And it's now
Right.
what, 22, 25 years later.
Yeah.
And so I think, Tom was absolutely right that most of retail is on this thing called this pendulum.
Mhm.
And you go one way really far, and then you start making corrections. You talk about how much store labor versus customer service versus in stock versus fresh versus waste. And you're kind of moving back and forth on these pendulum issues and doing course corrections, and it doesn't really change much. And then where the change happens is when you can work on what's called the fulcrum leverage type issues. And those are, building talent. And when your agenda can be more focused on fulcrum based ideas, then it starts to really change. And I think the biggest, most profound change, I think, has been the impact of social and social media in terms of how the customer interaction in the whole customer journey has absolutely changed. Because now the voice of the customer is so clear, so compelling, so quick. Customer letters in and customer messages and what can happen and how fast things can blow up. I, from my own experience being in the UK, plastics come on the agenda very quickly, and you're all of a sudden into a whole nother world that was not on the 3-year plan in the same way it was today, much like COVID, has done. So, I think shopper marketing hasn't really changed that much
Yeah.
in concept. It's called customer journey, which is kind of same. Isn't that the same as path to purchase? What am I missing here? The words have changed. It's now called more commerce as such, but the core principles of understanding what drives behavior change across the end-to-end process was the core tenet of shopper marketing, although it's gone through some label changes as it's gotten into this new commerce space. And certainly the technology is there, but from my perspective, even in the early days of shopper marketing, I looked at where we made our money, and year on year, it was very seldom that one tactic, whether it was let's do associate kits, let's do shopper events in store, let's do this, let's do that. You're building out these campaigns. The variations of what would work or not work, what was allowed and what was not allowed, was changing every year dramatically. And so it was a constant race to figure out which tactic is going to work. And each of those tactics had a different labor base underneath it that could do it well. And so we were constantly in a state of change. And I think today that's no different. It's just probably accelerated.
Yeah. For the past 50 years, it started where the brands had all the power, and then the retailers had all the power, and then suddenly the shopper has all the power, and the shopper, by way of this, this all this information that they got available at their fingertips, with technology, become smarter, and with that intelligence, more and more and more power. And it started to cause me to ask questions. What point is a retailer even necessary as an intermediary between that shopper and brand? And at some point, is this whole thing going to be just reinvented? And then COVID comes along, and it's like the retailer is all kinds of important again. What are your thoughts in kind of this post-COVID world about a lot of us thought that for a while it looked like Amazon was going to run away with the whole thing, and a lot of these direct to consumer players were really kind of gaining strength, and that maybe the old school brick and mortar retail wouldn't be as necessary anymore. And now it's like the whole game has changed again. What are your thoughts about the future of retail and that relationship between a shopper and their store?
Well, a couple of points. One, most of the activity in this market was around persuasion. And what I mean by that is there's two ways items get on shelves in stores. One is through persuasion of a sales team doing an excellent job with the buyer and making the case and getting it through. And then this whole ecosystem to help support that. But the other way is when a consumer starts to petition for the brand. And I've been a part of many range reviews where we might cut back and rationalize the range quite a bit, and then all of a sudden, today now more than ever, if there's some passionate consumers, it doesn't take a lot and they have access to petition the retailer. You see those items coming back in pretty quickly. And so who really has the power? And I think we've moved from persuasion focus to a partition focus, where the partition can come from the consumer, and their voice is so much more powerful that small brands have a huge, if they're really intimate with their consumer and they can ignite that, have much more power getting into physical retail than what the persuasion model might have only limited them to. So I think that has really put small brands in an advantaged position, because they typically come from DTC and they know their consumer really, really well. I think what COVID's done from a physical space is look at all the essential categories that now the consumer can buy online and not be too troubled by it. Well, there's a lot of essential categories in a retail space, but if you're going to go look at that space and go down those aisles where you realize, do I really need to go down toilet paper, paper towels, some of these things that are essentials?
Right.
What's the reason for those aisles in the store, and how do they really work? And so, where in the past, I think it was like pre-COVID, most of those categories had many, many facings to deal with velocity, and they were probably overranged but underchoiced. And now you look at those categories and you say, for that to have real physical draw, you really have to have a reason to browse, because browsing today, like it or not, is not very good online. And that's the physical space could be done. And so I think two things are going to happen. My simple prediction, who knows for sure. But I think this, what COVID has done is open an opportunity for a macro space reset. Before, most of the category spaces, a store space would be looked at on a category level, and it's so expensive to do a store layout, relayout on a macro level, that would only really happen in proto store changes or in remodels. But when you've got such space disruption, I don't know how many people are thinking about what are you going to do with this baggy space in some of these essential categories that you're just not going to put more and more facings of the same thing in those spaces. So I think what that's going to create, there's two things. One, there's probably going to be more macro space adjustments, which means great opportunity to provide leadership as a brand and help think through that space. That's going to be expensive, but I see that coming. You're going to have to reset macro. And then the second thing I think is a real cry for innovation, because look at the Pepsi, Coke, how many SKUs they dropped out that really made no difference in sales of these variants that was really there as a space play to protect that space. But if you reset that space and look at it, where's the innovation going to come from that's really going to drive change? And we've been so conditioned to operational improvement and efficiency that's very left brain. There's going to be, I think, an age of creativity and innovation required to look at and come up with things that truly are new, that truly do give the customer choice, and that the brands and retailers that understand that customer really well, understand that shopper really well, and understands how to bring that customer choice, then you've got a reason to browse. But without choice and just more range, there's not a lot of reason to browse a lot of those physical spaces. And so that's my prediction. Age of creativity coming to drive a lot more true innovation, not just incremental optimization, and then rethinking space in a way that gives customers a reason to browse in a physical store, because if they don't have that, too many things are easy to buy online.
I've got a lot more questions I want to ask you, but out of respect for your time, and certainly for the folks who are going to watch this, I want to be somewhat brief. I have so many questions to ask you about about retail as theater. And we went through this age of Walmart radio, Walmart television, retailtainment, and now COVID shuts a lot of this experiential down. And what does that look like going forward? But I want to skip that for now, and I want to hear about BigQuest and the work that you're doing, and just help folks understand what you're working on now.
Well, basically, it's a build on what I just kind of said, and that is, I really feel that there's a need for a better approach, a new method to customer-centric innovation. We've just been so incremental for so long, and agile is great, but it doesn't really always land change in a way that solves customer problems we're solving. And so when you build teams at the entry type lower levels that are working the front line, they sometimes can miss the opportunity of, is that really a customer problem we're solving? And is it going to create an outcome that the customers are really going to share and be remarkable for the customer? And customer-led innovation, like product innovation, we got that sorted, right? People know how to do that. That tends to be very contained in terms of, can be small teams. But when you start innovating toward the customer, you touch so many different parts of the business, and you got to go across so many silos that it is a harder task to do, and it's harder to measure, harder to show the business case. And so that's the space that I've been really focused on, is to say there's got to be a golden thread, a simple way to do this. And that's what I started working on even when I was at ASDA. We had a £5 million innovation fund, and we didn't always give the money away. I was a co-chair of that with the CFO. The problem we had is we had very few ideas come forward that would make a difference to the customer. Let's try Google Virtual Assistant and put that on the website. Well, that's cool and interesting, shiny object, but will it really change? And so we had to help retool and create a new way to think about how do you get to those customer problems that are worth solving, and then how do you support it in a way that it fits the business model. So what I've done is created a workshop, spent a lot of time on a framework that's mindset, because honestly, 70% of it's mindset, method, and motivation, to help frame up a customer innovation initiative so that you'll get a green light from sponsorship and be able to map it in a way that it works. I mean, look at Bill Simon did a great project, some learnings there on $4 prescription, right? Generics. The language of that had so much to do with the sell-through because it was so clear. And if you try to take many corporate objectives today and get people fired up about them, forget about it. Martin Luther King didn't say, I have a 3-year business plan. He said, I have a dream. And I think there's a lack of clarity about what really we're trying to do with customer innovation that's causing that to get a lot of those initiatives to fail. And so that's the space that I've been working in. I'm excited about it. It's hard yards because it's not an easy problem to solve, but I've really enjoyed it.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you. Are you having fun? Because it seems like you've been grinding for so long, building businesses, and at some point you just say, I just want to do something that's fun, and you look like you're having fun.
I am having fun. I've had a few people say, why are you doing this? Because it is a lot of hard work. Again, it's like, when are you going to stop?
Yeah.
I think I go back to Nelson Mandela's quote. I think his 80th birthday, they said, so are you going to, finally hang up the cleats there? And he said, no, I'm going to go find a higher mountain to climb. And I feel like that's where I'm at, is I got to find this is definitely a higher mountain to climb. And if you don't, what scares me more, Matt, is not putting something in front of myself that scares me to death and requires me to grow. Because if it's easy, then I just think I'll lose interest. And so it had to be something hard. Else, I feel like I would be consumed with hobbies and not happy.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because that kind of is the answer to what was my last question, which I'll give you in just a second. But second to last question is, who are you? How do you want to be known? How do you want to be remembered at your core as a human being, as a father, as a husband, as a man of faith? Who are you, and how do you want to be remembered?
Definitely want to be remembered as a person that lived life courageously, did his best, was not stopped by obstacles, and encouraged others to be their best. And for me, it goes back to 15 years ago. I wrote out some personal kind of things of purpose that I wanted to really focus the rest of my life on. And that is, if I could, by the time I finish and go off, hopefully to heaven, and can look around, that I could find maybe 50 people where I was one of 5 people that they'd say influenced them the most to be at their best and live at their best. And that's personal and professional, spiritually, all those dimensions. And so I'm not trying to change the world and influence a lot of people. I just want to get a handful, because I think it is in a one-to-one space where you can make those impacts on people. And I've been so fortunate to have people that have impacted me in this market, that whether it's Tom Muccio, Don Soderquist, so many that have invested time to help me, and I just need to pay that back. And so for me, I would like to be remembered as, for at least a handful of people, that this guy cared enough about me, invested in me to change my life and help me be the best I could be.
Yeah. Well, the last question is, what have you yet to accomplish in any context of your life that causes you to get up every day and play the game hard, to keep playing hard?
I don't know if I've hit 50 people. So, I mean, I wanted maybe not a net 50, but I mean, I think there's it's a great question. What caused you to get up early? I really feel like It's about helping others try new things, go on new adventures. What really motivates me, Matt, is that this whole thing on BigQuest, right? It is about innovation. But to be honest, there's nothing like walking around a corporate environment, and I'm not talking specifically Walmart, but big corporate environments, and seeing people disengaged, and they know, they're not bringing their best self to work, and they're not happy. And I've lived in environments where they like you couldn't wait to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
And that excitement can come if you get a team focused on doing something new. And so that's why it's that's the tip of the spear, is to say, okay, I'll help you with customer innovation. But the real outcome for me is some people feel like they got the music out of them in their daytime. And it didn't have to be a side hustle. They didn't have to quit to be an entrepreneur. They were able to bring their best self to work because they were doing something new and they were fully engaged, co-creating, being part of a solution. And so that's what gets me excited about it, is that it can really transform. And because you've done many great adventures, you get yourself on a great adventure, there's nothing like it in terms of inspiring you to do things beyond what you do in your daily job.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, Andy Murray, founder of BigQuest. It has been so much fun for me, who has known you like this much for a long time, to get to spend this conversation getting to know more about you and about your work. And thank you so much for making the time. And I look forward to seeing you again soon, maybe on Tuesday mornings.
Yeah. Come join us, Matt, on Clubhouse Tuesday mornings. We have a lot of fun conversation about all kinds of brand stuff and retail stuff. So look forward to it. And thank you so much. Been very gracious. Feel very honored to be part of your program.
Thank you so much, Andy. Have a great day.